Now, stay tuned to Vinyl Community Podcasts.
Buddies. Hey, it's Concert Buddie. Welcome back to another episode of Vinyl Community Podcasts. I don't really have a brand anymore. I was doing like Mind of the Record Collector. I'm trying to be all cutesy with these titles, but these are just conversations at this point. And I'm joined by somebody who we've been doing the dance. We've been circling the drain, trying to figure out how to make this work, and we'll kind of get into that. George Borden, almost fresh off of a 24-hour live stream. George, how are you?
Doing great. Hello, buddies. It's a pleasure to be on the show. I always wanted to say hello to the buddies. So there you go. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, George, I'm glad you came on. And it's funny because when I started, or when we collectively started Vinyl Community Podcast, you were one of the first people I reached out to. But hey, what do you think? And so we've done that dance, and we can kind of talk about a little bit about that later. But always enjoyed what you've done. Like, you've been live streaming before. Oh, how long have you been live streaming?
I think it's right at about a year almost now. I think we're at a year.
Okay.
I started the channel back like in 2014, and then I started doing vinyl community videos in 2019, and then all kinds of stuff got in the way, like life stuff, and then I stopped doing that. And then kind of started back up early last year, 2022, I think. Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, because I would come in there, and there would be like 4 people.
Yeah.
10 people, 8 people. And you guys were talking, I mean, and we'll kind of get into that. I mean, some of the stuff that you've talked about in your streams, like way over my head, and that's great. Like I like to like fly on the wall when you guys are talking about gear and things that I really have no business even like trying to talk about. But I think that's what makes the streams interesting, right? Because you have a little something for everybody, and we'll kind of get into that. But kind of leaning into the lead there, like what led you to like check out YouTube or start a channel or vinyl community, air quotes? What was kind of impetus behind that?
At the beginning, 2014, it was really just to share videos with friends that across the United States. I had some concert videos and was doing some things that had to do with recording and stuff like that. And it was just like I had maybe 25, 30 subs that were just people that I knew.
Sure.
And we were literally using YouTube for what it was originally intended to do, was just like post some things and invite your friends to come and watch them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Literally. And so that was it. And then later, when in 2019, I just, you get into like one of those rabbit holes where you're
So guilty.
You're watching this, and then at least did that, and then this and that. And I rolled up on some people talking about records. I think the guy Jeff Party and Baraka P Dub and
Paul,
even Mazzy and those cats. Like, I was watching those guys early on, and I just liked the idea of just sitting there and talking about music and talking about records. And it didn't dawn on me at first to talk about it in the form of records. It was just fun to talk about music. But then it's like, okay, well, I got a lot of records, so let's talk about them. It was also hard to find people that had records around me. And I worked at a recording and film college, but yet everybody was into digital, at that time.
Interesting. It's funny you mentioned the deep dives. I was actually guilty of one earlier this week. You're going to laugh, but somehow, I don't even know how, but I landed on a video about Indian call centers, like the scammers who try to like take care, advantage of older people. And 4 hours later, I'm watching, because there's like a whole counter movement of like anti-scammers who will hack them and record. Anyway, so yeah, 4 hours of my life gone in a blink of an eye. That's how easy it is.
Yeah, no, and it's sometimes I get into the true crime ones, and then I freak myself out, and then I like, did I hear something? Did I hear? You know what I mean? Like, and then I'm checking the windows and turning on the lights outside, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. You got to be careful.
For sure. That's fine. Well, talking about collecting, having records and being, not surrounded by people with records, looking for, communal conversation like that. How long have you been collecting records? And were you one of these people who, with the advent of CDs, digital, the format changes, did you ever get off the records, or did you pare down, or what did that look like?
Okay, so it started for me freakishly young. I just happened to be lucky that my parents were into it, and it was a typical early 70s living room where there was a black and white television, and then there was like one of those console stereos, and then there was records, And I was gifted probably like on my 3rd birthday a record player. I mean, I literally have that kind of memory, like still wearing diapers and, or, onesies and shit stuff. And stealing records from the living room, that became the thing. I would steal the records and bring them into my
Mm,
room, and my parents would
mm,
be like, "Where's my Dave Mason record?" And I "Oh, I don't know," and my mom's flipping. They're like, "Thank you, we'll take this back." They're
right.
having they're having a friends over and they want to listen to a record, and I've got it in the bedroom.
Yeah.
But so I have some records. I still have records that we, acquired in 73, 74, 75
Oh,
that
okay.
I've been carrying around all this time. I did get out of it for a little bit of time because around the time that CDs were kind of hitting big was also like I was finishing high school. I graduated high school in '86,
Okay.
and that was like CDs were kind of taking off. You'd go to a record store and there would be still records in there.
And a little section of CDs. Yeah. Tall
Yeah,
box. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, and then it just slowly shifted and became way more CDs and the records got smaller.
Hmm.
But when I got out of high school, I kind of left the house early, and it made sense, right when I was 18, I wanted to get out, move on to my own, and it made sense to kind of put the records and the stuff under the house in boxes and kind of carry around CDs because you're living in an apartment. You barely even have furniture when you're that young and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And you move a lot. And I was moving up to Northern California for a brief moment, and then going back to LA and doing all that kind of thing. And it just made sense to carry CDs because it was easier. But flash forward to 93, I had moved back up to Northern California. My parents moved from LA back to Northern California. And as I was helping them unpack their truck, by gosh, my mom had saved all of it. She just said there, and I open up a box and George's records, there they are. And I
That's
said,
awesome.
do we still have the turntable? Yeah, we still got the turntable. And it was like, boom. So there was probably about you know, 87 through 93, about a 6-year period where I was just living with the CDs.
Hmm.
And then I got the records back. And then obviously it was the perfect time too to get them back then because, you know, $1.95 all day long,
Yeah, the good old what we call the good old days. That's when I was coming at the tail end of that because you could still get. I mean, again, convert. I did streaming. I did Napster in college, all that stuff. But yeah, it used to be the barrier to entry was so cheap that it was like, why are you not doing this? I mean, obviously the convenient. They say the convenience of vinyl. Flipping it over and all. Kidding. But yeah, the good old days. You could go thrifts. You could go even to the record stores. Even record stores, they would have small boxes of stuff people had traded in for like pennies on the dollar, and you could pull like the good old days. You could probably pull a Led Zeppelin turquoise,
Oh,
no
yeah.
problemo. Now forget about
Yeah.
it, right?
Oh, yeah, and British Beatles all day long and Mono, Sergeant Peppers and stuff like that, and, it was I have to admit too that when I was a teenager, I didn't treat my records with the utmost care, because you always just figured you just go get another one.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Mobile media. Yep, yep.
and when you were partying with your friends, man, so you'd wake up in the morning, you have to find all the covers and the inner sleeves and the records and try to put everything back together. After a while, you just,
Give
I
up.
just, kind of had a stack of records outside the cover at some points.
Mhm, mhm.
But obviously when I was older, in my 20s and I got them back, and I was so kind of bummed at myself for not taking care of them, not because I thought they'd be worth anything, but because, oh, now I got to go buy this again.
Sure, sure.
And then I was able to go out and find them all again and just keep going. It was fun.
So from that point, when my mom's box of records pops up, how long did it take you, or did you like did dive right back in, or was it just kind of like an ancillary thing of, yeah, I'm still listening to CDs. Yeah, I've got records now. I got a record player back. If I can get them cheap, cool. Like, was there ever a collector mindset, or was it just like, oh yeah, I'll pick this up, or oh yeah, I saw this, bring it home?
I think what it was that once I got the turntable back to my house, and it was a really good turntable too. It was an Akai linear tracking turntable that was like state of the art at the end of the 80s.
Okay.
Really high quality turntable. And I got it all set back up, and I got the record out and got the brush out and cleaned the thing. I remembered like, this means more to me
Mm.
than a CD. I never got off on the idea of, opening the little plastic thing and pulling out the little disc. At the beginning, it seemed very space age and like
Yes.
Star
Yeah.
Trek.
Yes.
But that wore off after a while. I never really put together why they never meant as much to me. Whereas the records, I felt like I need to take care of these. I need to, give them a space. With my CDs, I ended up throwing all the covers away and just keeping like the paper and the thing in those booklets, so you could have like 200 in this big
Yeah.
space
A
of
big
this.
binder or the seat,
Yeah.
the visor binder. Remember those?
Yeah, and it's like with records, it's like, you if you're gonna move into a house, the first thing you have to do is go, "Okay, where do I keep the records?" And it's becomes part of the family, to me, at least. That's how weird it is for me.
Mhm.
I enjoyed the mechanical part of it, so yes, I was immediately now trying to go back and recapture the records that I had lost or the ones that I had that needed to be improved, and so it was immediate, like, 93, I'm in it, and luckily for me, at the time, I lived here in the Bay Area, and my parents lived up in a town called Sonora, up sort of by Yosemite,
Okay.
in between Yosemite and Lake Tahoe, right up in the Sierras, in the foothills. So, it was like a 125-mile trek, and so there was at least 4 or 5 little record stores that I became aware of on the way there and on the way back. So I would every time I'd go to visit my parents, I would sort of stop at these places and see what they had. And there was new records still coming out. It was
Sure.
blowing my mind. And then there was a lot of like, used bins, and it was just so it was so cheap, it was so fun. You're gonna go collect a big stack of records, and it's like, "Well, I better take $40."
Mhm.
Now you $40 is maybe gonna get you one Art Blakey record, you know?
That's true. Well, and even think about that time. I mean, $40, you're getting a big stack. You're getting what, maybe 2, 3 long box CDs? Because CDs were like,
Mhm.
remember, price point was like 17.98 at one point on some of that stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, crazy. You go into Tower Records or some of those dinosaur places, and yeah, it was almost $20 20, 30 years ago. It's the
yeah,
industry. You wonder why they kind of price themselves out, which you raise a good point. They're kind of doing a little bit again now. They're kind of like, oh, great, vinyl is back, air quotes,
yeah,
and we're going to just keep pushing the elasticity of that price point until it comes back. So it's funny how
yeah.
that happens.
And also in the '90s, I started doing a lot more, mastering jobs, especially towards the end. I was doing a lot of recording, of bands, engineering and producing records, and then
Well,
when
let's talk about that. How did you
yeah.
get into that? Because, and we can talk about how it connects to collecting and stuff. But how did you break into the industry and decide like this is what I want to do for work?
Okay, well, it started very early on. I mean, I was the kid when I was in 5th grade, I had a band.
Okay, so it started from the musician piece of
Yeah, and
play.
then yeah, and then but my goal was always to make a record. I didn't have a band because I wanted that vibe of, yeah, and rocking and all that kind of stuff, which is it's fun and I can do it. But when I learned how to make music, I was learning it all at the same time.
Mhm.
My fascination at first when I was 5 was make records. So, in order to make records, I had to have music, and I'm an only child, and none of my
Mhm.
cousins I had a lot of cousins in my family, but none of them were really as interested back then, that early on.
Mhm.
Some of my cousins later became interested in making music, but I needed to learn how to play the drums, for instance, because you need to have drums for a record. And I was lucky enough to where my biological father, who passed away a long time ago, I have an adopted father now that my mom remarried, and I have an adopted father. But my biological father was very encouraging, and he was in it. He was doing that.
Mm.
He was going
Okay.
to studios. So when I was a little kid, I was backstage at concerts. I was at Wally Heider recording studio watching people make records because my father at the time was doing that. So he was also encouraging. So here's a tape machine, here's your turntable, made me some speakers, here's a guitar,
Hmm.
here's your drum set, that kind of stuff. So I want I so I by the time I'm in 5th grade, I moved to Los Angeles in 1978 when I was in 5th grade, and then all of a sudden everybody was a musician, and they were all better than anybody I'd ever met when I was in 4th grade back here in the Bay Area. So that's how it started, was just wanting to be in a band, thinking that if you made good music, then you would naturally get to make a record. And then by the mid 80s in high school, there was studios everywhere. So it was easy to get into a studio for recording purposes. Also, recording gear became available to you, at on a home level, or a lot more of it.
Sure.
So that just naturally progressed into me gathering the experience, and then, eventually working in a recording studio as a recording engineer, and then producing records, and also don't forget it all started off with the Kool-Aid commercials and, my acting, thing.
I didn't want in case that was a sore spot, George. I didn't want to bring up
No,
child actor George Borden,
it
but
doesn't bother me.
so you were kind of, and this is after you moved to LA. You're
Yeah.
dipping your toes in. So you're a multimedia potential star. You're trying the music. You're trying the child actor thing, like
Yeah.
sing and dance. Were you a dance guy? Could you do some
No,
popping and locking, George? No.
none of that. No, just acting and playing music. But yeah, no, and I got to hang out with, me and even cats like Jason Bateman was coming up at the same time. We're roughly the same age, and so we were showing up. We even had signed to do a movie together that fell apart, at the end. So there was a lot of, I was, but for me, the acting part was really something that I was just doing to create money, right? So I
Mm,
could buy a Marshall stack for my bedroom, or a new drum set. And so what happens when you're doing that, you're going on interviews all the time, and your friends are saying, "Yeah, we're gonna get together after school and go jam at so and so's house." And you're like, man, I
mm.
gotta go audition for a McDonald's commercial." You know? And so, it didn't take me too long to just get tired of it and just stop doing it, Um but yeah, so it all sort of kind of progressed naturally. It started with me wanting to make records, learning how to play music once, and then the thing that was lucky about it was that I learned how to play all of the instruments required to make, rock pop music. So I could then get into I've been the bass player in a band, I've been the drummer in a band, I've been the guitar player in the band, I've been the singer in a band, I've been, whatever. And that was like, and I'm not that great at any of them, like that mind blowing, like Eddie Van Halen style, but
Mhm, mhm.
it's good enough to play in a show or to record. And that was always the goal. It's a lot more difficult to play in a recording studio because it's got to be very exact. It's all under a microscope. On stage, you can make a mistake and
Please.
probably nobody noticed. So
Mhm.
anyway, that just kept progressing until I was then, producing records for other folks, and had my own recording studio, also had rooms in the city in San Francisco where I was recording, and that progressed into the education side of it, where
Mhm.
once you've gathered enough experience, you then can teach at like a recording technology college. And I ended up at a very prestigious college here in the Bay Area where I was able to continue to make records and continue to teach the art of making
Hmm.
them. And I've been doing that for the last, 30 years almost. So
So if I'm following the timeline,
yeah.
you're in LA, late 70s, early 80s. How
Yeah.
do you did you or how did you not get pulled into like the hair Sunset Strip scene? Because that
Well,
seemed
I
to
did.
be like okay, so you were going to the Roxy and seeing those bands when they're like really early and stuff.
Oh, yeah, and I was playing at all those places too
Awesome.
in later parts of the '80s and the mid '80s. The amount of talent that was in the high school where I happened to live, and the high schools around there, was immense, and it was difficult to not find a good band or to start a good band and then play out. And you start at the kegers. You're in someone's backyard,
Of course.
the
Yeah.
kegs are flowing, and a fight breaks out, and the cops come, and then you run away, and then but if you're in the band, you can't because you're like, "Fuck, we gotta break all this down." You know? And, you maybe have
My
one
brother's
friend who
van, we
yeah,
gotta move
yeah,
it so nothing
e
gets broken. Yeah.
exactly. And, but then later, it got more serious and more serious, and then, like, development deals with record labels and things like that, and I realized real quick at that point that being a musician in the music industry was not something that I was into at all. I didn't want to, as an from an artist standpoint,
Mhm.
and I've done some pretty, I guess you would say, sort of big league type endeavors in the music industry as the artist, playing and singing and writing and doing all that. it just wasn't for me. I don't the adulation thing goes no place with me.
Okay.
Being famous is nothing that I think is even worth the time. It's there, I don't see an upside to it.
But the
And
girls, George, the girls.
yeah, well, look at me. That's not. This is not. No, no. But I it just wasn't my thing. So to be sort of behind the scenes, so to speak, making the records and helping artists do that, and then I get sucked into it, obviously from time to time, and play with people who I really love playing with, and I consider it to be an honor. It's not like I'm turning it down or saying it's horrible. It's just it's not for me.
Sure.
That it gets a little invasive and it gets a little weird, and you're making a lot of compromises. And I found a way to where when I want to make a record, I can find really good musicians or do it myself, and I can just do it because I want to do it and say what I want to say and make the music that I want to make, that is not commercial. It's not mainstream at all. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's and I like that part of it. Whereas though, if I'm the engineer or the producer, it's very easy for me to just look between the record label and the artist and sort of sort things out and make the record that everybody has decided to make, and it doesn't compromise me, as an
Mhm.
artist, so to speak.
Sure. Sure.
you know so it's it's there's a lot of moving parts here, Chance. There's a lot
Well,
of moving parts.
well, I got another question on that. So, how important is networking? Because obviously, like you're talking about, like putting a lot of pieces together, putting the puzzle together, and
Mhm.
obviously, you work with different people, different musicians, different studio owners, et cetera, et cetera. So, how important is it to the networking piece and finding people, one you like working with, two will show up, because that's really
Yeah.
important, right? Like your greatest ability is your availability, and three, like how difficult is it to kind of manage all that in the minutia?
It's a very small industry. That's the first thing. It seems vast because
Okay.
there's a lot of people trying to make music, but that's not the industry, right? The industry, it's like the NFL, right? How many football players are there in the world?
Sure.
And I'm talking about American football, so don't kill me, all you
Not soccer,
Europeans. I'm
not
just talking about
football.
America. The one shaped like this. Uh,
Pigskin.
yeah. But like less than 1% of all those kids that play in high school and beyond make it to the NFL. And
Okay.
it's the big time record industry is similar to that, right?
Okay.
So once you start working to a point where you find yourself getting into that zone, you realize it's not as big as it seems. I mean, if you think about it, there's a lot of mastering engineers and there's a lot of recording engineers, but when we're talking about records and stuff, we end up talking about like the same 5 or 6 people most of the time because they're putting out like 80% of the records that we're going after.
Right. Right.
Um, and I'm making it simpler than it is, but networking is you can't do this by yourself. I know people want to make you think that, right? You could just sit down at your laptop. You
Hmm.
can pour
Get
yourself a
Pro Tools.
coffee
Yeah. Right.
and
Right.
have that thing up on iTunes that night and never talk to another soul, never, just boop, boop, beep, beep, make it all happen. And then it's up there. Okay, that's fine. But I guarantee you that if you had 5 or 6 different opinions that you trusted that were, experienced opinions, it would be better than it was had you not. And that's where the networking comes in. It's there's the that cliche of strength in numbers,
Sure.
but it's hard for an artist to take an idea, throw it out on the table, and then let people converge on it like a bunch of jackals,
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
and there's like a big dust cloud, and then it's like peanuts or something, like Snoopy when they're making like a sandcastle, and then all of a sudden they back away, and it's like,
There
whoa,
it
that's
is.
not what I was planning.
Hmm.
But that happens with music, but it's important to remember that no one thing defines you. This one song is not going to define you. This one time in the studio, and it's not a product of you. It's a product of all of these people that were involved. And once you sort of give into that idea, it makes it a lot easier to collaborate. And it is definitely worth the time to hang out with people that are way better than you.
Mm.
It's humiliating sometimes,
Mhm.
it's intense, it's frightening, and it's scary, but you learn real fast, you know,
Sure.
uh, and you pick up a lot of really good things on the way, and most of the people that you work with in that context will be nurturing, and they're happy to see it. I don't consider other engineers that are early on in their careers to be a threat to me. I want to help them. So networking, yeah, I mean, but on that tip, I would just say, and then I'll stop because I know I just start flapping, and
You're fine.
George Borden, that's my name.
See,
Right?
I wasn't gonna bring it up, George, but okay.
It's all right. It's all good. I'm cool with that. I don't mind being a nerd. But what I would say is this: what you do is everybody's gonna get a lucky break. You're just not gonna know when it's the lucky break. You may not even recognize it as being significant.
Mhm.
So the only thing that leaves for you to do is to just execute every time.
Mm.
Be as well rehearsed as you can be, practice as much as you can, get those hours in, and treat every single one of them like it's the Super Bowl, because you don't know which one of them is going to be the thing that, if we could predict it, then we'd all be on a yacht with Jay-Z.
Right, right.
So just realize that it will happen. You may not recognize it while it's happening, and that's sort of frustrating, because
Mhm.
we're so used to seeing the movies where it's like, the big break comes and they're just there and that
Superstar
spotlight.
overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
But
it makes me think, I don't know if you've heard this, but so Bryan Cranston, the guy Walter White from Breaking Bad, he
very
did
familiar.
he did not get, like, his big break. I think Malcolm in the Middle was his big, like, commercial break, until
Yeah.
he was, like, 40, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I was listening to an interview he did once, and I've always kept this to heart, is that he said, because he'd go on auditions and it just wasn't going places, exactly what you're talking about. There wasn't overnight success. He'd been doing it. He was waiting tables, like the whole rigmarole you hear a lot of actors talk about. And he
Yeah.
said that he always held to these four kind of tenets: that you had to be patient,
Mhm.
you had to be persistent,
Mhm.
luck, like you're talking about, which you really can't control. You can kind of make your luck if you're prepared, right? But luck
Yep.
and in talent, either you have it or you don't. And if you have it, you got to work at it to make sure that exactly what you're talking about. Like when the opportunity,
Yeah.
one, you can recognize it, and two, you're prepared to act on it. So I always think about that in relation to exactly what you're talking about. Like when I worked for Nike, same thing. I was working with a lot of smart people, and there was a lot of imposter syndrome early on for me. And again, small potatoes, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I think when you're working around people that are like smart and really good at it, you have no other option. It's either sink or swim.
Yeah.
Either you're going to walk away, I can't do it, or you're going to be pulled through the keyhole
Mhm.
just by being around talented people, smart people.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, most of the great people that I've ever met have a certain amount of imposter syndrome because they're sitting there going, "Why me? I'm just me.
Mm,
Why is everybody focusing on me right now? I'm just me." You know, and I think that's another thing too is that when you're an upcoming into whatever it is you're trying to get into, you see this sort of collective of people that you consider to be successful.
sure.
They're maybe you not necessarily idolize them, but sorry, that's the neighbors up there. You don't necessarily idolize them, but you look at them with you know
Rose
what's the
tinted
word?
glasses, like,
Something
wow.
like that. You just go, yes, I really one of these days I want to be like that.
Mhm.
And you think it's like a little society of people that and you're outside it and they're in it. Then you finally sit there and you realize they all feel like they're outsiders. They're all individual human beings. They
Mhm.
don't feel like they're part of some kind of club. That and they are just as sort of like looking at the everybody else from the same perspective. And that's something once you get that square, then you kind of go, okay, we're all just trying to do the same thing here, and there's good in this, and I don't have to be overwhelmed or afraid or shy about it. I can say what I want to say, be who I want to be, and it'll work with some people and it won't work with others. It's all good.
So how do you we go a little circle and tying it back to the record collecting, music collecting piece.
Yeah.
So being that close to literally making the donuts, to borrow the expression, how does that give you a different perspective? Does it affect what kind of music you're looking to bring into your house to collect, to listen to enjoy when you're around it so much and you're like literally like creating, like you said, like an artist, you're creating, helping these bands shape themselves. You're helping a label and a band come together to make the record they want to make, exactly like you said. How does that affect you and what you bring into your home to listen to?
I have found myself working with bands where their music is completely foreign to me, and I have to kind of learn as I'm going along. But I mean, at the end of the day, they trust me as a recording engineer. Usually, they've heard something else that I did, and so they say, "Hey, can you do that to us?" Well, we'll try. We get in there, and they're playing completely different music than I'm accustomed to hearing,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
that may turn me on to some of their influences,
Okay.
and I might get them not from a sort of a fan of the music point, but more like to study it, right? To become well versed in it.
Sure, sure.
It's like I don't necessarily want to learn another language, but it's definitely comes in handy when you're in a foreign country.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know if I want to put that time in, but it's the same kind of thing. But then on the other side of it, there's times where it grows on me, and then I become a fan of that. But my tastes for my personal listening pleasure, I'll be the first to admit, are pretty sort of narrow. Uh,
Mhm.
I I uh I have maybe 500 jazz records, not a lot. Maybe, 3 or 400 classical records, not a lot. And then the rest is all just the same kind of stuff that everybody would expect. You know, uh, I grew up in the 70s and in
Mhm.
the 80s. And by the time I got to the 80s, my musical preferences were already kind of almost
Fully
done.
formed. Mhm.
So I didn't get into sort of a lot of the, again, it's like I feel envious that I didn't get to people that are listening to the Smiths and the Cure
Sure.
and Depeche Mode. That was not my style of music back then. And now that I see, how people love it so much, I sometimes kind of go, gosh, I wish I would have. I have one Depeche Mode record. I have one
Do
Cure
you have
record.
Violator? Is that
Yeah,
the one you
of
have,
course
George?
I have Violator. Yeah, that's yeah. And it was because that I happened to be, working in a record store, in at the time, one of many jobs, right?
Sure.
You got to make ends meet, and so sometimes you have two or three different things you got to do, and so but being you know, yeah, it's all very narrow taste though for me. I mean, obviously, I'm a big Beatle fan, the
Sure.
Stones, the Led Zeppelins, the classics, that kind of thing. But those were the new heavy duty bands when I was, a
Coming
little
up.
kid,
Yeah,
right? So
for sure.
yeah.
Well, let's tie it back to the YouTubes, as they say, because
Uh,
one thing, and this is why I think the timing is good because we're recording this at the end of the year, but this is gonna be the first show of 2024, and I thought it was very symbolic because you just came off of the 24-hour live stream. So let's kind of dig in there. Um, so obviously doing the YouTube stuff, getting to know people, knowing these various personalities as we do. What was the inspiration, the motivation, or just the why notness of we're gonna live stream because you do live streams every Sunday night, most Sunday nights, with Nick Fantasy,
yep.
and sometimes John joins you, right? Like so, you guys kind of have like a set template and then have people up here and there like anything else. You guys talk about a wide range of things. Talk about gear, talk about music, talk about Sound Burgers. We're both owners of Sound Burgers. You have a vintage, I have unfortunately the repro. But how does it go from that to let's just do a 24-hour live stream?
Okay, so the reason that the live streaming thing started in the first place, and as you said at the beginning, it was me and two or three other people watching,
Hey, I
and
was I was one of those people when I could
yeah.
come in there.
Yeah, no, and Fantasy was one of them, right? Miss You was one of them. So, but what it was that I was doing the thing where you sit down and you film a video, and then you transfer the video into your computer, and then you put it into, whatever editor, and then you do all that. And it just seemed like it was a lot of stuff going on and nobody was really paying attention. So what I figured is, well, hey, if I just turn this thing on and start talking
Mhm.
about whatever it is I was going to make a video of, then if somebody happens to jump in there, then maybe they'll get involved and it will become interactive. It was literally that simple. And so I started by talking about like a Van Halen record with the clicks in it, but that was a video, I think. Then it was like I was talking about XTC one night, and I was going through the whole kind of history of XTC. The funny thing was I didn't even pull the records out and show the covers or anything. I just went through like a historical perspective. And Nick and Miss You were in there, And that just sort of started it. Like I realized, okay, so now I can talk about it. And if people jump in, they might give me another little diversion.
Sure.
And I'm all about tangents, but then what happened was it was suggested to me in somebody else's chat, why don't you start talking about the technical side of making records? Because that's why I started getting involved, say, on Rachel's show in the morning for a bit, was because they were talking about mastering or making records or something like that. And I was in the chat answering questions and like everybody else. And then somebody said, well, hey, Rachel, I think was like, hey, I'd like to interview you. Why don't you come on the show? And so I never really did a sit down interview with her, but I just started jumping on in the morning. And that it was one day someone said, hey, why don't you do that on your channel, talk about the technical stuff. So that started that. And that's where the angle towards the more sort of like, let's talk about guitars or microphones, or Nick's a tube guy. He likes to talk about amplifiers. So it was just, if I don't really think anybody's paid attention, but we took Vinyl Community off the title, about a month ago, 4 episodes back or something like that, just because people would get upset because like, well, we're going to talk about guitars, or we're going to talk about records. It's like, okay, well, we just can't, so here it is. It's just called Sunday Live Stream, and who knows what's going to happen. Right. So, and it's been fun. And a lot of people, all the people that I was watching, and enjoying, have come by at least once or twice. And it's fun. You've been on there, Metal Theologian's been on there. These are some people I've been watching for like a long time. And so that's great. I love doing it. And, hopefully we'll up the game next year and make it even better.
Well, so with that said, the inspiration behind doing one for 24 hours, though, George.
Oh, well, that was just me. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I blocked that out.
Live streaming. Listen, live streaming is like I think live streaming was like the tour of the Jord this year. Like I started doing, so many people in the community started doing it, right? But no one, as far as I know, like I know the Jazz Bum, sometimes those streams can go on a hot minute, go into the early morning hours, but a 24-hour, and again, and you can talk about it too, because obviously 24 hours, you're conditioned from back in your mastering days, like, oh yeah, we just go on a weekend bender and we're good to go. But to do one of these live streams for 24 hours,
okay,
how, why?
Okay, all right, yeah, sorry, I like to go on tangents. Okay, so here's what happens. One time, when me and Nick talk, just to each other, and we sometimes talk for 5 hours a day. We get into one of these things, but we just don't go on air.
Sure.
So we're just video conferencing. And one time we were talking about something, and it was like, wow, this would have been a good show. And so Nick goes, well, just go live. Now, we didn't think about it, but it was like we didn't even pay attention to what night it was. And so we jumped on, and we were kind of going over someone else's show.
Bastard.
I know. And we weren't even thinking about it. But then it kind of went on for a long time. And then I got asked to be on the Jazz Bums. And this is when the long ones kind of started. Was that?
Oh, so you're the reason, you and Chris.
Yes. So what happened was I'd already met Felipe and I'd already met Mike, but I'd never had the chance to even speak to Chris. And when me and Chris finally hit it off, we realized that we like had a lot in common. We were really big Rush fans. And so the thing went on like, for hours. And then again, me and Nick did a couple where we didn't even realize it, but like 8 hours had gone by. And all of a sudden, people started talking about it like I'm the long stream guy. Right?
Yes.
So that was it. That was the thing. So because I became the long stream guy, just like the most idiotic thing I could do, I said, okay, fine. When we ever hit, if we ever hit 1,000 subs, I'll do a 24-hour stream. Why not? And that was it. And again, as it was coming out of my mouth, I tried to suck it back in, but it got away from me. And I said it. And then, so we gave away a Rolling Stones box set and did a 24-hour live stream just because I was being called the live stream guy that did the long ones. And we only did like 3 of them. And it was like we did an 8-hour one. And then someone's like, well, let's go to 10 this time. And I remember, like, I think it was Jose, right? Oh. He was in there like, well, come on, man, let's just take it to 12 hours this time. It's like, oh man, and okay, fine. So we'll do it. So that's what happened. And I made the statement and obviously had to live up to it.
Well,
That's
more
why.
power to you for following through, George, because I think I might have been watching that night when you said that, and I could almost see the word. I could almost see your hand come up, like you literally just gestured right there to pull the words back in. But so you did it.
I did it.
You did it.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say that the community kind of rallied around you for 24 hours for sure. At least there was I don't even know if there was any drama. I think it was kind of like a what do they call those during wartime, like an armistice? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There was little, if any, drama. There was people coming up during the overnight. You had the European block. You had Stunty coming on. You had all those folks. Michael 45 jumped on.
Yeah.
And then you had people who had been on. Like I think I was on in the evening, and then I jumped on in the morning. And
Yeah.
so it was really that's what I thought was really cool about it. Not only the fact you did it, one, but two, the fact that everybody was really cool for the most part. There wasn't all that usual chirping, and if there was, it was dealt with or just kind of faded away, etc.
Well, well, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead. You finish before I say it.
No. I was just going to say it was. I think it was a nice moment for the community in the sense that there's a lot of conflicting personalities, and there's like anything else, any kind of online diatribe. It could be a message board, it could be a Facebook group or whatever. But for 24 hours, George, it was a nice thing, and I think everyone rallied around you and Nick, and I think it was a lot of fun. I think so. What was your impression? I mean, obviously, toward the end, I think you're in almost in a catatonic state. I think just trying to get you were thinking of cheeseburger and milkshakes, which I would be right there with you, just trying to power through.
It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. The problem I had was that I took this little short nap right before going on. So the first hour I was like, that was the worst part for me, was the first hour.
Okay.
As it went on, it was fine. But to be honest with you, at the end, and I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or whatever, but by the end of that thing, that last hour, we got up at about 230 people on, with us watching. And that just blew my mind. I don't know if I've ever seen that happen, on any other live streams.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to say because it was the best one. I think it was people were just like, is this guy going to die on air? It was like that. It was that.
We're going to witness. Yeah. Somebody's going to explode like scanners.
Or like it's like, or the strange curiosity of like, oh, look, double rainbow, and somebody, everybody starts watching that. It's like, it's why did I watch this? You know what I mean? But it was, and it felt really good. And it seemed like, it was like a community type thing, and everybody was wishing us well. And, so many people had stopped by. And by the time we got off the air, there was like almost 6,000 views on that thing. And it just, and I'm not saying it like that was the important part. It was just, it was because the fact that people responded so well to it made it worth doing, and made it feel, good to do, and worth the time. That being said, don't go over 12 hours, folks, because YouTube won't hold it. They don't.
I was going to ask you because I did see in the aftermath. Obviously, certain folks were able to get out clips that they needed to get out, I guess. But yeah, the actual stream itself, you can't even go back and watch it because you found out the hard way. YouTube, it's a 12-hour limit, huh?
That's what, and we didn't know. It was like all of a sudden Nick like called me right after, and he said, "Hey man, it says it's not available and that it can't be viewed." And I'm like, "Oh, maybe we got banned, or maybe maybe there was some." I mean, we said some horrible stuff, in hour like 17. We were talking about really, that's the other thing, is that our show, it's weird because sometimes people use it as, hey, this is my chance to get my third grade locker room talk out on Borden's stream, and they come on and and I'm not a prude. We're all adults, and again, this is not for kids. It's all good. But I thought, well, maybe somebody said something so heinous that
maybe during that 17-second blackout in hour 8.
Yeah. So, but it just turns out that they're not. I mean, if you think about it, if everybody did 24-hour streams, their server would fill up and they wouldn't have.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But it was somebody did cut it down. They took all the boring parts out and made it into a 2-hour extravaganza. That shows you how much boring stuff there was in the middle, at least as far as they're concerned. Okay. And they're now hosting it, and that's fine, and they can have all the views. Good for you. But
So tell me the aftermath. So because I was there at the end and watching, I was in the gallery. You logged off like I think within like 37 seconds of hitting that 10 o'clock marker your time. So what are the next 24 hours like for you? Like, did you get the burger and milkshake? Where'd you go? Did you just literally go right behind you and just black out like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop and just collapse? Or
No, because what had happened is that I had got a text from my parents like 10 minutes before the show ended. Like I looked down and it's my parents. So I had to get off and call my mommy after the show.
perfect.
And that's literally what I did. To be honest with you, I only slept I only slept for about 3 or 4 hours solid afterwards, but I did get my hamburger and my milkshake. I did do that. So
Well, tell us who you went, George. I mean, because you could have went anywhere. Did you go to In-N-Out? Did you go to a local spot?
I door dashed a place called The Habit.
The Habit. Okay.
Yeah. Double char with cheese and a chocolate milkshake. Thank you very much.
Attaboy.
Yeah, that was my treat.
So now, I mean, obviously, like you're talking about Mr. Livestream, would you ever do it again? Would you ever do a 24-hour live stream? If you got, I don't know, making it up 5,000 subs, or if there was like somebody who's, oh, come on, you do it again? Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, it was fun. I mean, and I had a bunch of stuff planned, but it became very clear that I couldn't do that with 4 or 5 guests on the screen. You know what I mean? Like I had these like activities that I was going to do because for some reason in my mind, I assumed that there would be these long periods of just me by myself. Right. So when it got down to me by myself and the viewer count was low, okay, we'll do a cooking segment, or I'll, you know what I mean? Or I'll do my guitars,
tour
talk
or
about
something.
guitars, or we'll get nerdy with something. And that just, it never happened. There was at least 3 people on the screen the entire time, which was blowing my mind. There was people that stayed on there for 12 solid hours without getting off, you know?
Yeah, well, who was the guy? I forgot his name. I apologize. He was the guy who was in there for like, was it the first 12 hours? An older guy, Jack? Was that his name?
Yeah. At the very beginning. Yeah. And he doesn't live too far away. He lives right up here in Berkeley.
Okay, because I couldn't recall ever seeing him before. But I mean, literally, the times
Well,
I was doing a home project during that first part of it, and every time I'd look at the screen, there was that guy, Jack, and I was like, I've never seen him before. Who is this guy?
I had never seen him before either, yet I had been on streams with him before because he used to have this big, long white beard.
Oh, it's that guy.
Yeah.
Oh,
He's on the morning show. But he'd have this big, long white beard, and then all of a sudden it was just gone.
Gandalf the Grey is like, nope.
Yeah, and we talked about that, and I was just like, at first when he first came on, I'm like, what the heck is this? And then, of course, he explained it somewhere during the show. I just said, you do look different, So that guy. That's who Jack is.
So now that we've done the 12, or you've done the 24-hour live stream, now that you've set the bar, that I think it's going to be the Cal Ripken, it's going to be the LeBron James scoring record. Like, I don't know. Somebody said yesterday on our stream, they said, well, JJ did a 48-hour stream. Now I can't confirm or deny, but it sounded like urban legend to me. But
I think it's probably true, but my goal was no sleeping. I'm not gonna go and turn off my camera or people watch me sleep on the couch. No sleeping.
Truman Show, no Truman Show thing.
No, that was the gig. So I don't know.
But because one thing you did say on the stream, and this is someone I want to follow up with you on, is you were talking about like actually paring down your collection. Is that something you're looking to do going into 2024, and why? I mean, clearly the Suicide Watch was okay. You made it through, so it's not like you're looking to end your life prematurely. But why pare down your collection at this point?
It happens every time I bump my elbow on one of these stupid Calexes. And
survival. Okay,
I live very modestly.
Sure.
Okay, I have 2 rooms this size. One of them is where I sleep, and then everything else I have is jammed into this room. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 guitars, 3,000 to 4,000 records. And then obviously it's overflowing into my bedroom. And then my little, tiny self-made kitchen down there has got boxes and boxes of records in there. When I stub my toe on a box or I hit my elbow on this Calyx over here, I go, you know what? This is stupid. I could have twice as much space if I got rid of some of these. And that's where it starts.
Okay.
And then sometimes what also happens is that I I don't know if anybody's ever had this problem. Sometimes I'll be yearning to listen to a record,
We couldn't
and I'll
find it.
sit there and I'll just confuse myself as to what I want to listen to. Right?
Yeah, it's too many choices. Choice overload.
Yeah. Or like as soon as I set the needle down, like on a record, it makes me think of another one. So then the next thing you know, I'm jumping from song to song and I'm listening to one song on a record. And then I go, well, I might as well switch over to 7-inch and listen to 45s. And then, oh, well, gosh, but after this song, it comes on the album. Now I'm pulling the album out. I'm going back. And then it gets more confusing than it is just, relaxing and listening to music. Right.
Sure, sure.
But I do have this, I come from the old school thing where I'm rarely sitting in between the speakers going, oh yeah, Donald Fagen sure really nailed that. I usually put the music on as a background to other things, you know. I like to cook and I like to, play with the dog and cook and clean and move around the house and do stuff like that. And usually that's why a record's playing, is just to have something going on, because I'm not sitting in a place, and that's my gig. So I often will take that little flip bin that's right there and fill it up with a theme, and kind of maybe spend a weekend or a week, going through a particular theme.
I like it.
And then that way it's kind of decided for me, it's like a little playlist, and I just go through them, and as I finish one, I put it back, and then I maybe pull something else out, put it in the back, and I kind of keep this sort of revolving door of those. But what's happening right now is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 cubes of filed stuff.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How organized are you? Are you an alphabetic? Are you a genre guy? Or like, how does, in a perfect world, how do you organize your collection?
So, okay, this whole wall has got built-in shelves that have records in them, and it goes, A through Z down at that bottom right there.
So complete alpha, genre, doesn't matter. It's all alpha.
No genre, just alphabetized by last name, not first name. And so it just goes and goes like that. Now, that's that. But over here, there's 9 cubes, and the bottom 6 cubes are the go-tos that I listen to a lot. As much as I talk about I listen to the Beatles a lot.
So heavy rotation stuff.
So Beatles, Stones, Soundgarden, my Kiss records, even though I never listen to them, but I like to look at them from time to time.
Sure.
And then my Rush records, some Bach, and then my Coltrane, Blakey, and Lee Morgan records are all in that. And then the top 3 are just unfiled stuff that I've just never gotten around to. You got to do that worm thing where you make space, and then you got to sit there for 3 hours moving them around. Then your back hurts, that whole vibe. Yeah. So that's kind of it, I probably got another, I don't know, 600, 700 in the bedroom, and another 600, 700 of them in boxes down the hall.
So it's just, you just need a breathing room. It sounds like it is reached the apex, and now it's time to pare it down.
Well, yeah, I've it's funny because I've gotten into going down another rabbit hole on YouTube. One of the other ones I get into is like the tiny living, where people
tiny houses. I did that during the pandemic. Yeah,
right.
Van living. I was doing van life stuff, all kinds.
Exactly, and I considered it. Like my dad just said, "Don't be an idiot." I was telling my parents that, like in the summer, I went to visit my parents over in the Virgin Islands, and I was like, I was thinking about getting into the van thing, and my dad's just like, just don't be such an idiot. You're too old to do that. It's for young, beautiful.
It's a young person thing. For
yeah, sure. And I'm like, well, you never know. But one of the reasons that it helps me is because I'm not a big house guy. I've had them, I've lived in them, I've owned them.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to a point where when it was down to just me and my son was here, for a year, I like the small and figuring out ways to maximize the space.
Intentional living, yeah, like the minimal.
And so I learned a lot from watching that kind of stuff. But that's the thing, man. I keep going, well, if I was going to get in a van, at most I could think maybe 8 cubes could be built in there somewhere. So then I go, well, let's get it down to 8 cubes. And then I go, well, I don't have to really, I can stay, here and keep them, It's just, I just like everybody, I go through those little phases where I try to think about something and I want to do it, but then talk myself out of it, or I talk myself back into it, just the normal flapping. I don't necessarily think that I can part with any of my records, but I'm trying. I do it. I'll be sitting on the couch. I'll be looking up, then I'll go, I'm just going to start at the A's and I'm going to pull a record that I don't think I'll ever listen to again. And the first one I get to, and I go, well, yeah, I haven't listened to this for 3 years. And I go, yeah, but I might want to tomorrow. And I slide it back in.
You just tuck it back in.
Yeah. And I can't even get one. I can't even get one unless I've got like 7 copies of it. I'm like, but this one's mono and that one's 65. That one's 69 repress. What if I want to compare them? And then they both go back in. You never know when you're going to need this 15th copy of Abbey Road.
This is true. Well, as the saying goes, George, it's either day one or one day. You decide.
There you go.
Anyway, well, George, I've enjoyed the chat. We're running up on time, but I'm appreciative that you came on. I'm glad to see you've recovered from the mental gymnastics, the verbal gymnastics that a 24-hour live stream can do. And I'm glad we could do this. I know we've been talking. I know, like I said in the open, like you were one of the first people I reached out about the podcast idea, and maybe that comes to fruition one day. But it sounds like your streams your Sunday streams kind of what it is, and you guys are just kind of like there's no structure, there's no need to like have a format like I kind of do in these podcasts. It's just it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, and we tried too. It was like we even sat there and had a little meeting, a production meeting, and said, okay, so how are we going to do this? And I saw how you did it too, where you could do like a live stream in the first hour, and then you have the person kind of sign off and say, okay, now that's that, and then that can be edited down. We might be able to work towards that for 2024, but because I like doing as many different things as possible, and I really appreciate what you're doing. I think you're going out and you're trying to do some stuff and add some value and add some different angles to what is basically a bunch of people that are kind of just talking about records, but you're taking it a one step further and added some different types of shows. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on here. I really do.
Yeah, of course, George. Anytime, we'll have you back for sure. And I didn't even know this. Had I known you're a closet Kiss guy, we just did it hasn't aired yet, but we just did our last Kiss roundtable. I could have had you on. We could have really pontificated about this Avatar nonsense that they're doing, and I could have been learned about how Paul does like the Shecky Green voice. I had never seen it, so I seen it. And,
yeah. Mark Kopernicki comes on the show kind of regularly now. He always, he has to go on Patrick's at an hour into our show, but he always gets warmed up on our show and then goes off and does the Patrick stream too. So.
Yeah. He's been on our roundtables too. He's a really smart guy. So anyway, George Borden, thank you for joining. Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
And that was another trip around the turntable. Thanks for listening to Vinyl Community Podcasts.